Hey, welcome everybody. This Scrutiny Committee meeting is being conducted on a hybrid basis in accordance with the Local Government Direction Wales Act 2021, which will operate alongside the Council's standing orders. Council standing orders and code of conduct will apply at all times during a virtual meeting in the same way as ordinary meetings, and members should conduct themselves accordingly. I remind members this meeting is being live streamed to the public. Please can those attending switch off the cameras, mute your microphones when you're not speaking to ensure there is no unnecessary background noise. And I also remind members to ensure the chat function is switched on and to use that facility to indicate to me when they wish to speak on a particular item. Please do not speak until I invite you to do so, and remember to unmute your microphone and switch your camera on. A recorded version of this meeting will be uploaded for public viewing as soon as possible after the meeting. Welsh translation of the proceedings can be provided upon request. The images and sound recording may be also used for training purposes within the council. Thank you very much. So just in terms of the agenda, is there any apologies for absence?
Councillor Linton, Chair.
Apologies, Councillor Linton noted. Any declarations of interest from any members? Just one declaration of interest from me. I work in housing within the city. This isn't a decision-making body, so I don't think there's any conflict of interest that we continue to do. We then go on to the item 3 on the agenda, the 25-26 budget and medium-term financial plan. Members will be aware that we're looking at 4 service areas today. Miriam's kindly joined us to give an overview of the sort of budget report, and then we'll leave us because his service area isn't being looked at today. So if you've got any questions generally about budget process or anything else, please get them to Miriam before he leaves, after he sort of introduced the report, and then we'll run through each service area as we go. We've set some sort of outline timings. Hopefully they're about right, but it was Neil and mine's guess, so we may end up with a little bit of a pause in between service areas if we got it wrong. And apologies to head to service if we did get it wrong the other way and we run over. Thank you very much. Paul, I don't know if you want to say anything. Just pass on.
No, that's my own introduction.
Yeah, I'll do the intro, Chair. Thank you. So we're here to discuss the 25-26 budget and MTFP. Cabinet approved their draft budgets Monday this week. The scrutiny meetings are part of the consultation arrangements of the council, and the minutes of this meeting will be reported back to the cabinet for their consideration when they develop and finalise their budget at the beginning of February. So just to outline the timetable for everybody, consultation is running from the 13th, that's Monday, to the 5th of February. With the public and internally, obviously this is one of those. Cabinet will meet on the 12th of February. They'll agree their final budget at that point, and then the council will consider and agree the budget and the resulting council tax required on the 25th of February. The deadline for any alternative budgets is 5 PM on the 17th of February. That's fine. I just want to say a few words about the process, just some high level summary first. I'll take questions on the generality of the budget, and then you've got time with each head of service to go through individual proposals as you want. So the position has improved greatly since February last year due to a low RSG assumption. The predicted gap this year was 21 million at that point. Obviously, since then, we've had a national election. Crucially, we've had an autumn budget. More public funding was announced in that budget, financed by taxation. That has meant that the council's funding, primarily the RSG, has increased significantly from what was expected, resulting from that UK budget. So on a cash basis, we've had a £25 million increase. On a like-for-like basis, because there will be some branch transfers in there, it's about 21 million. So a sizable amount of money, probably more than I can remember for a while. with council tax also at 6.7% draft for consultation. So those have increased funding position. The gap is now a much lower figure, just over £4 million, and same proposals have been developed to sort of deal with that. Why do we still have a gap still, after that big increased funding? The reason being it's increased costs. We've got cost and inflation increases, which are really significant next year, about 25 million. That includes national insurance cost, pension cost increases, and the usual sort of pay rises, etc. The report, I think, gives a flavour of some of the key figures that makes that up. And then significantly demand and the cost for services is also significant. The draft budget has got 13 million in there over and above the cost of inflation.
Three or more, 1-3.
1-3.
Okay.
13 million over the cost of inflation. I guess of interest to this afternoon, we've got 1.8 million going into housing because of the increasing demand for temporary accommodation. This would be the second year, which is very significant investment in that area. And we've got around £800,000 for the closure of landfill sites. Obviously, that's a net income generating facility, and that will be lost when the site is full and closed. Lots of interest to this committee, but in general schools, there are no savings attached to schools, and there's about an £11 million increase in schools costs being funded in the draft budget. Lastly, turning to the savings, two goes at this. Obviously, there was the November cabinet where they approved a lot of their saving proposals. Obviously, there are some additional ones that was agreed on Monday. About £4.6 million worth of savings total. Relatively sorry,
saying 4.6 in total. That across the
between both meetings, but which the very, very vast majority are actually low impact or no impact efficiency type saving. Only 350,000 is deemed to be having an impact on frontline services and have been consulted on with the public. So the balance are those sort of efficiency, low impact savings, which is very obviously good. And that's the shape of the budgets, really. And that is why we've still got a budget gap even after what was a very good settlement. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Marion. Any questions directly for Marion? We're sort of focusing on process, if that's okay. Yeah, Councillor Thomas?
In previous years, considerably more than that has been up for consideration by the public in the consultation process. Can you comment on that, please? So much lower this year.
Well, obviously, we had the settlements delivered to us just before Christmas. So therefore, Cabinet met after Christmas, and therefore Cabinet knew that what that RSG increase was, and that enabled us to have much more clarity as to the scale of the challenge.
So we're anticipating the majority of that extra funding, which we could not be sure about.
Yes, I think when the autumn budget happened, it was very clear that when there would be additional funding going into the public services across the UK. Couldn't we put a figure on it then? No. We had to wait until the settlements came through, or the rumours kind of started to happen before we knew what was happening. But yeah, you couldn't put a figure on it, but you knew that it was going to be much better than we were.
I'm only asking the question because in the past the public have been able to have a say in the growth monitor area and a greater number of spending decisions.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, budget savings that are in here are the ones that are required to balance the budget.
Mm-hmm.
You don't need to put in any further, obviously. So that's why there is the budget gap is that £4 million or so. So therefore, that is the quantum of savings that's generally been identified.
Do you mean that there's only 350 of that going out to council?
Yeah.
It's because the rest of it falls.
That's what I meant. wasn't
Yeah,
it?
yeah, I beg your pardon.
Yeah.
So sorry. It's just the nature of the savings that have been identified are actually those low impact.
I mean, if we went back to November, would we have been considering then? It would have been would it be that we would have been considering a larger number of consultation items for the public? But when we were awarded the larger than expected increase, we then decided that we had money to put into those, so we didn't need. I'm making myself clear on this, probably not. Does anybody understand what I mean?
I know. I think.
David's got it.
I think,
David just nodded. Thank you, David.
No, I think the savings in front of you that were agreed in November and last Monday are the savings that are for consideration by yourselves, the public, etc.
Two separate things, isn't it? If obviously if we didn't have as much RSG coming in, we would have either had to make more savings or put council tax up more.
Yes.
So there's only three variables.
Yes.
Yeah. So yes, so then there would be more to
Yeah.
consult.
That's right.
Whether or not somebody could have to consult, that's a standard thing across the board, isn't it?
Yeah. But did we have a little sort of had we identified things which we may need to cut back, and had we thought to ourselves, well, that money we think is going to be coming in, so we don't have to give as many proposals for cuts if we've got this extra money coming in.
Obviously, those are subject to.
Because I expect that there will be comments on why there is less
Yes,
opportunities for the public
Yeah.
across a wider range of services to comment.
yeah. The cabinet had clarity on the budget gap following the MSG,
Yeah, I don't doubt that. I mean, I
and
fully
therefore-
accept that.
and therefore that the quantum is the quantum that's there. Clearly, there are conversations with the cabinet throughout the process, but those are obviously just conversations. These are the proposals that are here are the ones for consideration.
So one of the consequences of the iterative process is a lot of the types of savings that you've had in previous years, they've been made, so they're not there.
Yes,
So you get a smaller,
yes, it's getting,
it's
getting more and more depressing, isn't it?
It's such a big amount of the budget is
Come
fixed.
back. Yeah.
You've taken you can't redo
Yeah.
those savings that have been done.
The
Yeah.
last two or 3 years, there's been a step change in the amount of savings required. Gone are the days where we were able to identify 10, 12 million pounds. We did for a long
I
time.
know, I remember.
After
It's
the
over 50
austerity
million, I think.
period.
It's well over 50 million since I was first elected, I think.
Whereas I think these days, we are done so much now that it's becoming much more difficult. But luckily, the funding has allowed that to not be a problem.
Well, one of the things is the legal obligations now of services that we have to deliver. I mean, there is less scope for cutbacks, isn't there?
Yeah, I mean, Paul will have a view this one, but I think all of our services across the council are under a lot of strain and challenges because demand is still increasing, and historically we've been cut back.
But demand is increasing for good. I just want to grab this. Don't make it all gloomy. If anybody's actually out there watching this meeting, the demand has increased for positive reasons. In that the city is having a lot higher number of residents than anywhere else in Wales moving into it. Doesn't make your job any easier, though, does it?
Okay.
That's a statement.
Councillor Leach?
Thank you, Chair. Lauren, just a quick question. In the report, page 23, we talk of financial resilience. We talk of earmarked and general reserves. You said in 24-25, they will forecast to reduce these earmarked reserves by 21.5 million down to just over 100 million from 2 million. 25-26, then do you see these going down further, these earmarked reserves, or do you see these going back up? So there's quite less, but maybe 20% it's come down.
Our current forecast would suggest that they'll be just going down.
Does that cause us as a council a problem?
I think that the time to comment on that will be when we're further through the 25-26 financial year, and there's a bit more certainty on that one. So the reserves are going down because mainly expending capital reserves. We put money aside to fund capital projects. Those are being delivered, and therefore, you know, they have some respects. Obviously, got the PFI that will be draw on that reserves next 15 years or so. I would have thought. And you know, those make up the majority, not all, but the majority of the withdrawal of our reserves that will continue next year. We've got some risks as well that we are managing, and you know, there might be some costs associated with some of those, depending on which way they go. So I can see this carrying on to next year. That's going to forecast. But I think that assessment of the budget is something that I do annually. So I'll need to see how next year goes. What is clear to us is that we will be needing to borrow money for funding quicker than we envisaged, because the drawdown from reserves is a little bit faster than was envisaged. But that's a natural consequence of what's happening. Those reserves are expected in line with their intended use.
Of course, you set the reserve at A level. We've seen that with the leisure centre, for example, set a reserve at 20 million, and then when you actually come to tender and do the work, you've got to have sort of more in or whatever.
Yeah,
because costs have increased.
Yeah.
By the time from when you set the reserves to when you actually sort of do the projects, and it's
yeah, but, you know, we have had some challenges with a few of our capital projects. You know, the leisure centre in particular.
Yeah.
And they've been a draw. You know, more of a draw than was originally envisaged.
I think there's, you know, could think of this 100 million plus a large spread many reserves, but I think the vast majority of that is allocated. It's not reserve, and it's not much to spend on things if you allocate. So, yes. But obviously the thing that really skews that, isn't it, is the PFI. So, you know, it's kind of it is technically reserve, just, you know, that's there. That you take that off the bottom line before you start.
Yeah. It's an interesting question on kind of reserves. Worthy of the meeting itself, really. You know, but when you're looking at our reserves, what kind of explains our reserves? Capital reserves, big chunk. PFI, the biggest by so far, and it clouds the picture. You know, people do say Newport's got a lot of reserves. Yeah. I look at the picture differently. I exclude the PFI. It's a grant. As parked on our in our reserves, and is absolutely committed for the next 15 years. And then when that road is then funded and you know, comes back into the ownership of the council. We had some enabling reserves around the invest to transform, and we've got some risk reserves covering some general and specific risks. You know, those four explains the majority of our as those risks you know, come to fruition as we spend money on transforming the council. You know, we've got some big projects happening, you know, on our property services, on rationalising our assets, customer services, etc. They're going to be a draw capacity to deliver those projects. The PFI will continuously decrease. It is wrong for any of my officer colleagues and members to think that we're swimming in reserves. I actually have a very different view.
I think it's quite a fair point that you're wanting to say, it might be worth the assembly, because you're quite right. Public perception, all the money there. Why do we need to do this? If we all have an understanding of why we can't, actually, it doesn't actually mean it's great we got the money there, but it doesn't actually mean it's there for everyday use.
It's in the public domain because I wrote it in the cabinet reports back in February last year. Our general reserve 6.5 million, but too low. Now we can manage that at the moment because our totality is more than sufficient that, you know, in a disaster you can draw upon those other reserves, but of course you may need to repay them, which would be very, 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 very challenging as your reserves use. that general level of reserves has to be increased.
It's very. And
Well, it's
Chair,
6.5 million
yeah,
10 years ago. The budget's much larger now.
Yeah. when I looked at the voluntary sector chair, there was obviously clearly local authorities are substantially more complicated, but with more obligations. But in the voluntary sector, there was this sort of assumption or advice that an organisation would be expected to keep enough money to cover 3 months of the operation of the company. Now, it's never going to be that simple, is it? But I mean, and I think the question for was, you've actually answered by saying in that general reserve, there needs to be 6.5 million, but that's low. We should be able to do that.
Yeah, it's the assessment of the budget that I'm legally bound to do each year. I said last year, I'll be saying the same again this year because the not changed. But the totality of our reserves, means that that's not a fundamental financial issue at this point in time. The budgets, my assessment of the budgets of the draft budget is that it does deal with the majority of our spending pressures, which are ongoing. There's a couple of things that I think that we should probably do before we finalise the final budget. But I'm sat here fairly pretty comfortable that we've dealt with the big issues. Yeah.
I mean, thank you for explaining that because it helps us to deal with the issue, any questions which our constituents come to us with. Because I certainly have this, you've got hundreds of millions of pounds there in reserve.
Yeah. One of my two answers is on reserves. You're just gonna peel that top layer layer off. Just don't take the global figure.
Yeah.
Peel off the top layer and understand the detail, and then that enables you to think about the reserves differently and with a bit more intelligence.
Absolutely.
It's fine. Councillor Big, yeah. You sure? Yeah. Okay. Any other questions for Marion?
Yes, Chair.
Yeah. Councillor Alex Pins.
So a quick one. Marianne, do you think this report should mention the underspend from the last budget?
No, it's unrelated really. I mean, obviously any council can use reserves to balance the budget or to fund an item of expenditure in the budget. To that extent, yes, it could be appropriate, but the draft budget doesn't require that to happen, and therefore it's not an issue that needs to be raised.
Okay, yeah, thank you.
The spend is just counted in what we have in our
Yes.
coffers on that day.
Yeah, well, not on that day, but yes, yeah. So we are predicting that the current underspend, which is about 4.5 million, I think, will
Disappear entirely by
on
the
the 31st of March.
We'll be there.
I think it will be very, very useful to have there as well.
Any other questions for Marion? Thank you, Marion. We'll see you for the next meeting. You won't have to say the same thing over again because we've heard it. I just feel what you're saying. You can go straight into the service. Okay, David, thank you, David. So we're looking at a number of items in the service area. We're going to start, as we may, with the new budget savings consultation. So the ones in Appendix 4 of the papers on step out, so it's not the same papers. So review of community centres across the city, 25,000, and to reduce the number of physical library sites in London, reduce the service 102,000. Then we'll go to the pressures after that. That's okay.
Okay, so I'll just kind of give the high level details. So I do the community centres, halls, questions and movements libraries.
Yeah, brilliant.
Great. So community centres, as everyone will be aware, Within the corporate plan, the council is committed to making best use of land and property through community asset transfer, and the asset rationalisation project is part of that. Looking at this year's requirement for budget savings, we've kind of looked at community centres in the round to identify where the financial pressures are. Just to give you all a feel for that, we have 9 directly managed sites and 9 volunteer managed sites. We begin focusing on the volunteered manager sites, as you have seen in the paper. There's a relatively small amount of revenue funding going to some of those organisations, not all of them, at 25k, but also a significant maintenance backlog, which is not within the revenue budget, but is a pressure that one day the council need to find the money to meet. So that's clearly a real potential pressure and concern for us within housing communities. The proposal for the voluntary managed community centres is essentially to level the playing field in terms of revenue budget, so we bring that down to 0, and then work proactively to identify where those voluntary managed committees are able to take on community asset transfer, and potentially where there is no viable operating model for that centre, to consider other options, which could include disposal. In terms of the council and community centres, so this isn't going to generate us a revenue saving. This is about ensuring that we're able to mitigate our pressures and have provision that will be sustainable now and into the future. And before I talk about that, I think it's just worth giving everyone a flavour for what our community centres look like at the moment, because they're really not your traditional community centre any longer. Actually, they tend to be a bit of a hybrid between council services and office type provision, and with a bit of kind of space open for community bookings. So you know, there's that dimension to it. We look at the average booking in our community centres, considering all available slots for rooms. It's currently running at about 32% bookings.
Are we talking about the 9 councils?
We're talking about 9 councils. Yeah, just to clarify that, we're talking about 9 councils. In terms of the voluntary managed centres, we don't have that data. However, we have had a couple of buildings handed back to us recently. When that's happened, there's been very, very few organisations where we've had to kind of move people onto different buildings. In terms of the council and community buildings, the proposal here is we've identified 3 buildings we'd really like to pursue community asset transfers on. The first is Easwell, and as people will be aware, there's already been kind of an in principle approval that we're working on that. Okay. The second would be a community asset transfer of Cullean Community Centre. So really they're working with the community to identify how that centre could be brought into community ownership. It's worth noting in terms of Cullean that actually that is one of the centres where NCC doesn't have that presence, and the community bookings are genuinely there, so there may be more scope there. And lastly, we'd look at the community asset transfer of Scrutiny. So again, this is allowing us to move buildings into community ownership, whilst also ensuring that we're able to put a really robust and sustainable staffing structure in place to mitigate the ongoing budget pressures that we have there. So kind of in summary, I think whilst the revenue savings for the budget is relatively, they're pretty low, actually doing this work is going to enable us to move to a position where, whilst we will have a small footprint, we'll have more assets in community ownership, but also in terms of our council run centres, we'll be able to run a more comprehensive service and be able to run that in budget without the pressures.
Chair, sorry, I should have made a declaration of interest that I sit on the committee at Tuckey Chiefswell Community Centre.
Yeah.
So I've got a few questions.
Yeah, follow what you've got.
So within the voluntary run community centres, How do you gauge whether a group is fit to take that asset on at the moment? Are the groups scrutinised? Is it based on kind of trust? Is there anything in place at the moment before that asset is transferred over, apart from the condition of the building and possible overheads? Is there a process that you follow?
Yes, so kind of colleagues in Tracy McKinn's area have been developing a community asset transfer policy, and kind of summarise the process there. This kind of the process of engagement, and really the council, when we can consider any transfer, would have to be satisfied that that organisation has a robust business plan, is correctly constituted, and is able to take on the asset. And I think in some ways, voluntary groups, community groups are able to access capital funds that are unlikely to be available to the council. So there's some examples, there'll be a condition attached to that, or a way of working to ensure that funds are kind of brought on to improve the condition of the building.
Because I know from our experience at Leaveswell, the length of time it's taken for the asset to be transferred over has meant that we've really been limited to what we can do with the building. The large hall, as you know, has not been available to us, and that's the main part of the asset. And so we've not been able to develop ideas or trial out kind of projects, because we've been stuck with only a limited amount of it. The other concern, as Leaveswell aside, is I do know from slight personal experience that some community centres have not been functioning properly for the past 5 years, even though that they've had the asset transferred over to them, and mainly for petty disputes, within the committee, people sitting in roles and not fulfilling those roles. Is there some kind of audit process the council have got in place whereby, as part of the asset transfer, that periodically they can do an audit of the not just the building, but also of the committee and the way things are run, as a backstop, really, to stop these community centres failing, which in many cases at the moment, from the title and got writing, they're not really functioning at all, and that is to the detriment of the local community. We're desperate to use them.
So we don't have an audit process at the moment, so we're not going in and auditing voluntary managed community centres. I think what we are keen to do, as we're identifying new buildings and centres for community asset transfers, to really kind of think about what that looks like, and to seek assurance around that group's governance structures. Is there a robust constitution? Do they satisfy us in their governance structures? And then potentially also, as part of that transfer, you can look at elements of requiring a report of community benefit, things like that. So I think that's certainly something we're considering and we'll be looking at, councillor.
I think what's happened in the past, I think with Richard of this farm, that an officer from the council sat on their committee as a means of point of communication, and also help have direct contact with the council. Do you think it'd be possible to consider, maybe not officers, but certainly councillors being encouraged to sit on committees? Even though I do it on a voluntary basis, they don't have to do it.
We'd have to check with legal on what our powers on that, because I'm not once it's actually community asset transferred. Is that a term? I don't know. Once it's been transferred, I'm not sure what powers we have. We have, but community councillors. I know we do have some powers, because it all effectively comes back to the law stands head of legal. If there is issues with that, they can be monitored. I think we'd have to inquire about whether we need even our ability to do that. But
because moving forward, the ideal would be these voluntary groups and charities run the community centres, and they're functioning brilliantly.
Yeah. But I think your concern there is it looks all great when you transfer out, and then it can go pear shaped afterwards.
Yeah. And there's 2 or 3 people just sitting on a community centre who've got keys and access to it, and really it's on their terms. If they don't like you, you're not around it, and you have to wait a year before you get the opportunity to turn into an AGM to do anything about it. I think that when it can sell, it can go wrong, quite drastically, and we haven't got many of them. That's the concern. I welcome what's happened at Eastwell. It's brilliant. We're really looking forward to what we can do with it, but it doesn't always work out that way.
Yeah, that's
But very much on that point, I think in the past people relied on the charity commission and the function which they believed them to have, but I'm afraid it hasn't worked out well, particularly since COVID. They're not doing those checks. Some very dysfunctional organisations are continuing unchallenged. You know, and there's a basic failure to do all of the obligations. And this thing, you know, the strengths which they can offer to the community and those reassurances just aren't being followed through. And you have very dysfunctional management teams, which can become just cliques. And clearly that it takes away from the benefits to the community that come from having a centre. You know, I mean, it's really sad. I mean, we don't have any non-denominational centres left in the whole of the city centre now. You know, because we've just seen the recent closure of one organisation that we had.
You're going to say quick, Chris?
It's still on the.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, sorry. I might be completely wrong with this, but please tell me if I am. But was Rivermead, the community centre there, built as part of the planning conditions by the developers of the site?
I think it probably was. I'm not sure we have to get the response to before both times, but yeah, I remember.
Well, if that's the case, is there any impact then because they built it, but then if the council looking to transfer it back into the community? Is there, and then would they be able to come back with council, what I'm saying, in terms of financial or legal responsibility because we're handing it on?
So I doubt that because one in terms of time, because when I used to live around there, it was still there. That's 20. So it's been a fair while. And two, in terms of usually those arrangements, it doesn't have to be managed by the council in the first place. So there's options, but it just is the default. But let's get you an absolute answer on that.
Can I just clarify that we've got right in my head, because what you sort of said in your introduction is slightly different to our red came to me. So we've got 18 community centres. 9 of them make up about 25,000 that we're investing in. The other 9 we council run.
Yes, right.
So we're looking to transfer all those 9 to community asset from transfers plus another 3.
Yes.
And retain 6.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Fab. Just got that right. So the 25,000 makes up the 9 community centres. Is that funding split reasonably even across them at £2.5 grand each, or is one community centre all of a sudden going to lose 20 grand and the other ones lose like 500 quid each?
It's a real mismatch. So
Yeah.
some are getting a level of money and some aren't receiving anything.
Okay.
So it's a complete mismatch. And I think it's probably worth saying within those sectors that whilst with that revenue out, the council is still responsible for the majority of what's going on in that building, in terms of repairs,
Yeah.
the structure. So
What about some utility bills and ongoing sort of values? Are the communities involved?
it varies.
Right. Okay.
Yeah, there's not a consistent picture.
Okay. So this hopefully gets us to a more consistent
It
picture as well.
definitely does that. Yeah, that's an additional benefit. This is, since we sort of poking through this, it's a mishmash of random things that's occurred over the last
Yeah, because what you want is a consistent policy for how we operate that. So that makes sense to me in terms of a proposal, so people are clear about how we deal with community asset transfers and community centres and all the rest of it, rather than having. What I was worried is, one community centre gets 24 grand, or the rest is split between them, and then all of a sudden that one has to close because they just can't find that money, and the rest are fine. So I think it's useful to sort of regulate the position. Do you want to come in and say something?
Yeah, I think you should remember that the reason why the voluntary sector is coming in run the community centres because of the position we find ourselves in over the past 15 years, where the community centres have either closed because the funding is not available because of austerity. And these voluntary groups are not necessarily coming in because they want to do it. They have to do it because the alternative is closure. I think there's a lot of responsibility for the volunteers that are involved. It's very daunting. And I know from personal experience, sometimes it's very difficult to keep people involved because of the fears of what comes with taking on this whole building when we've got that kind of green light. I think it would be helpful moving forward if it kind of tapered off. The tapered off scheme was considered by the council to oversee the costings. So if you overtake community centre, in the summer, say for example, you start in August, September, then you've got the winter in front of you. You're trying to run programs, but then you're going to be collared with the heating bill in March. And if things have not kind of gone as well as planned, and there's been a few other damages along the way, then all of a sudden that we have massive pressure for a kind of voluntary community centre committee. And so I think even if there was, because like I said, we've ended up this position because we've not got the money to run them ourselves, is if there was some kind of support or kind of if the council had made some contribution towards certain costings, or a tapered off scheme where over the course of 5 years, the payment wasn't completely the responsibility. The people who are probably new to running a community centre. We're fortunate, we've got Top Cage, a very experienced charity, but these other, you know, we don't know at the moment who's going to be taking over these assets in the future. And it could just be a group of local residents who've got no real background. You know, they've got all the enthusiasm, but 2 years up the line, when the bills start to hit home, and all of a sudden they have to put their costs up, and they're running a business officially, and it's an awful lot of pressure and expectation for them. So I think some kind of safety net from the council, even if it's not any, you know, with any guarantees that there's some kind of backdrop is there for them. I think that would sit better, and feel. I think that it would help encourage people to get involved. They knew it one more.
I think you know, we recognise that community asset transfer is really quite complex undertaking, and one of the things we are looking at through the wider asset rationalisation project is having some kind of post to support with that process, to actually take people through that process. And you know, if any suggestion around what that looks like, the wider asset.
Brilliant. Just one last point, Chair. I just want to mention it that don't get the praise that you know that you deserve, and just from the Top Cage committee you mentioned the other day, how brilliant you and Alan have been during this whole process. I'm not sure if Paul passed that on in person, but certainly he was very complimentary, the role that you played and the work that you've done behind the scenes make that happen as well. So thank you.
That's good. Because get praise from me.
Can I bring Councillor Clem? She's been patiently waiting here. Sorry, Jan.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, I just want to speak about Killeen Community Centre. You know, it would be a total loss if this is closed completely for the library, because I was speaking to the librarian this morning in Bettis, and she was working there Saturday and told me it's very well used. And if it's lost, nobody is going to come forward to run it voluntary. So there would be a loss of library, and they haven't got anywhere near to Killeen. You know, they are like a little community on their own, out all the way out there. And, you know, that's the lifeline of some of the old age pensioners and all that go to that library. You know, I just wanted to make that point. And because it will be closed completely then, as you said, the building is in disrepair, you know, and they won't have the money to do it up. And that's if volunteers come forward. And I can't see volunteers coming forward to run the committee at all. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Jan.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Cleverly. So I think with all of these proposals, you know, we recognise that they are really, really sensitive, and throughout this process, we're really committed to listening to public and to board members. So, you know, I'm meeting with various board members tomorrow, including those to begin that process.
Yeah, and your report did say that would be a process that take place over 2 years rather than one.
Yeah.
So, you know, hopefully that sort of option can be identified in those areas. Yeah. Any other questions on that, or can they move on to the next point, which is the library's focus?
Yeah. Brilliant. Thank you, Chair. So again, I'll touch on the high level. So as you know, people are probably aware how library services are accessing Newport have changed significantly. And I think probably that trend was given a real kind of injection of pace through COVID, but actually it has been sustained since COVID. And what we've really seen is a move to more online visits and issues, and a central library and museum kind of being far and away best used physical site. So if we kind of look and compare the library performance from 2018-19 to the last financial year, and we exclude digital and central library and museum, so focusing on those branch libraries, our visits are down by about 38%, and the issues are down by about 44%. Looking at utilisation in the last 2 years, in 22-23 visits, and so this is focused solely on the Central Library Museum and the virtual service. And visits were at 66% of all of our visits, and last financial year they were at 74%, so trends increasing. And then in terms of issues, in 22-23 they're at 52%, and that's increased again to 56%. So what we're seeing is there does appear to be libraries remain well used in the city, but a real shift in how people are choosing to use and access the library service. So within this proposal, in order to make budget savings, we're proposing to make a range of changes and move to more of a kind of a compass point model, where we have physical sites throughout the city, but a reduced overall footprint. So just to run through that for the committee, we'd retain Central Library as our kind of south compass point. It's worth noting within that, as part of last year's MTRP, we are in the process of installing the mobile library access point in Hill to replace that provision there. In the west, we'd retain Rogerstone Library and close the Tredegar House Library. In the north, so completely
Scandinavian.
We would look to merge the provision between Bettis and Malpas, and kind of that would work over a couple of sites. In the east, obviously, we retain the library in England. So within the proposals as they stand at the moment, that would mean that the Tredegar House Library closes. That has the lowest number of visits of any of the libraries in the city, and the issues are quite high. And in response to that, we intend to look at options for installing the mobile library access points. People can still come and collect physical stock, really recognising that for some people it's not what's going to work for them. Within the proposal as well, we also, this does tie in to Beverly's point more widely to the proposal around PHS transfer. The proposal would be to close Korean and to really try and work and look at whether there's capacity within the local community to develop a volunteer-led library. As I've said, though, we are aware there's lots of community feeling there. We really are in a place where we're trying to listen to all of that as part of the consultation process. And so in total, these proposals would lead to savings of just under 202,000. That's made up of deletion of some posts, about 1.5 FTE, and some reductions in the book fund, a lot of miscellaneous professional fees, and sort of the budget that we use for events. So that's the proposal for the library service in the nutshell.
Thank you, Chair. If I would just ask can you put some meat on the bones of the percentages, please? I mean, percentages can sort of make things look really bad, even if they're not. So when you say visit numbers are down, actual visits were down, say the central library 38%. What does that equate to in terms of numbers? Are we talking tens? Are we talking hundreds? Are we talking thousands?
We're
just
talking,
gives a bit of an
yeah,
idea.
we're talking thousands. in terms of visits. So I've got some detail. Can I give an example? Is that that'd be helpful? So if we look at Tredegar, for example, in terms of visits, in 2018 to 19, it was 13,400, just under.
13.
Yeah, last year it was just over 9,000. And that is a consistent picture across the place.
Yeah, I do think title library can be a bit misleading with some of these buildings. So St Julian's was the immaculate closure, as far as I'm aware, is still closed, even though it's still functioning and open. But the library is only one room in the whole building. It's not a library, even though it's called a library. I think there's another 4 or 5 rooms within the whole building. I don't use libraries, I'm absolutely honest with you, but still value them. And that's the problem, that people want libraries open, but they're not visiting them. So maybe instead of closing libraries or moving libraries, is really exhausting how they're promoted and pushed. I know St Julian's, for example, is on more or less on the school grounds. And then they've been an appetite from the school to get involved and make the kids from it. You know, don't know if any progress was made on that. As a walk-in, I never heard anything back. But I still think there's a massive opportunity for consultation here and ideas. And I think that I don't think really that we've promoted our libraries the best over the last 10 years, because we've probably been preoccupied with some other major areas of concern, you know, with cutbacks left, right, centre, and so, but you know, possibly encourage the task force and all like that term, you know, but a working group that really gives the future of libraries a bit more thought before any rash decisions are made, or we start kind of, you know, advertising for volunteers, because I do think that, I think a lot more could be done. I know with St Julian's, it was more of a social library than anything. And the feedback that we got from a lot of the local residents is they just like popping in for a chat. They know the library's there. They just sit at the computers and have a browse on the internet, and they make themselves a cup of tea and hang around for an hour a few mornings a week. So that idea of community and community libraries, I think, is something that could work. Again, Torquay as well, community centre. You know, that if that community centre is going to be open every day, a small section of that be set aside for a library, possibly. You know, I think we give it a bit more thought. I think we could really work out what all options are available.
Thanks, Councillor. And it probably is worth noting that whilst, you know, we have to look at the financial pressures that the authorities have under, kind of alongside that, there's a couple of kind of wider issues in terms of wider points in terms of library service that goes some way to answer your question, I think. So, firstly, what we are beginning to see, and they're nowhere near the level of pre-COVID use, but the events that we run through the library service are continuing to be. So that there is an upward trend since COVID there.
But could we warn the public that if they're still not being used in a year, then we're going to give it serious consideration of closing them or moving them? I think that this has come around quite quickly, and I don't think people have really had the chance to value their local libraries. And I think that a bit like when they tried to stop mayonnaise. I think it was Heinz, it was Hellmann's or Heinz, and they said we're going to stop making it. Oh, and it was up on, everyone started buying it again, because that idea of losing something until you realise that you're genuinely going to lose it, that people start paying attention and taking a bit more interest. Yeah, but in terms of that, but even putting that out there and saying that they're under review for another year, and if the figures continue, then you know, you're not really leaving us much choice. But I think that, you know, we're going to make cuts and we're going to make savings. We haven't going to make cuts, we're going to make savings. But this has all come around quite quickly, and I think that it has kind of scared and upset a lot of people. And then it's a negative news story for us as councillors and as a local authority.
And yeah, and everyone to take part in the consultation process. That was the screen.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, I mean, I noticed that the two libraries set for closure are both, if you like, on the edge of Newport, particularly with Tredegar Park. the Treacle House Library is right on the edge of the the suburban area of Newport. And I do worry sometimes that the default position when we got financial pressures, the default position tends to be closure, whereas perhaps the default position ought to be how can we develop this facility? How can we make it better? How can we get more users there, rather than just saying, "Oh, the easy answer, close it." And I think there are particular difficulties because if you look at the aging population, there's certainly elderly population in Clean. There's an elderly population in Dufferin. And many of these people don't use online services. They still don't use online services, and therefore access to a library is perhaps the only option they got. We know in Wales, for example, a third of the population are classed as elderly, and that figure is going to rise. People will get older in Wales, not younger. So I do worry sometimes that default position is that we perhaps ought to be looking at being a bit more creative about how can we make that facility more accessible and open it up to public use. And I would remind people that in Dufferin, for example, we have a large population there of economically deprived people, and so it does worry me that, that perhaps we should be looking at how can we make that facility better and encourage people to use it more rather than just to close it. I note that you, in respect of Treacle House and Clean, you're talking about installing the library access point. Presumably that's where people can collect books and return books. But there's also in the current library in Dufferin, there is some computer access and internet access for people who don't have or can't afford internet or computer access. It's also a place where people go to get information. The information leaflets on the council are in the library, available for people, as well as collecting their food bags and so on. So yes, I think it's I think more could be done rather than just say, well, let's close it. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Screen. Do you want to come back on that? You don't have to.
I was just going to say, I suppose, this project seems to be one that there's quite a lot of feeling about. The whole process of the consultation, isn't it? And as we're saying, is go back to this constantly use it or lose it, isn't it? If people aren't using it, maybe this has heightened people's awareness.
Yeah.
And almost on all of that isn't to encourage consultation. 2,000 people write back and say, well, no, actually, I didn't realise that, and I'd rather use my library. Then that's all part of the process, isn't it? So it's almost on all of us really to be sure that those impacted or maybe impacted engaged.
Absolutely, yeah, completely echo that. I mean, for me, that statistic that you gave today, 9,000 people, I can't remember that figure, visiting the Treacle Park Library, one that we're proposing closing 35 people a day. There's clearly a need for that service, isn't there? 35 people a day coming through the door, it's in some small numbers. So, I pose the question, so hypothetically, is that the right thing to do? Are those the types of things that we want to be taking?
Actually, the earlier point you mentioned, there's less savings this year, but the savings are left. The bigger, easier things, this is only 100,000, but there's not much really in our environment that can be considered now. So you're on the low.
You get to the case that people want more and more, don't you? As you kind of, that's all you're left with, isn't it?
To maintain the libraries that we've got at the moment, just may well be here. How much do you estimate it costing? If nothing was closed for a year and it continued, how much would it cost us?
So that's
staff levels.
That savings 102.
102. Yeah, and that's revenues, that's staffing, bookstock, things like that.
Yeah. And the reality is that to make the savings, it's going to cost us 146,000 this year. So the 102 saving, we're not going to realise this year, but we'll start to realise in years to come, and that will have an increase in inflation as well. So, there's actually a cost implication to this initially, but Yeah, and over the long, medium term financial plan, sorry.
And just on that 146, absolutely right. That's the maximum cost in terms of redundancy, because that's just really because of the specific demographics of our work. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
I want to make the point. No, I mean, I've been going through this process for quite a few years now. And part of that time was as a member of the Fairness Commission. So I was looking at perhaps things in a slightly different way, in more depth than we would normally do, just spending a couple of hours in a committee like this. And I want to make the comment that the council itself has got far more sophisticated marketing strategies than it used to have previously. Now, I'm saying, I don't suppose our strategies would stand up to perhaps some of the huge marketing companies out there. And the things with, big revenues for advertising and things like this. But we are better at doing these things than we used to be. And I believe that we're being more inclusive of our population. But you see, there's very little of this is ever new. There's very little original thought that ever comes out of these cost savings processes. And I'm thinking back, was it 2015, 2017? I think possibly, what year did you come to the council, Paul?
I remember that. I think it was 2018. I've obviously been with that, I'm not sure.
Yeah. I can't remember whether Tracy was here then, I know that. But we went through all this. They actually proposed cutting the Central Library. They actually wanted to take Central Library out and leave a few hubs around the area.
That was before my time.
I mean, I remember this. I remember who put this proposal forward, and they're no longer with us. But the point is, look at the resource which the Central Library now is. Where would we have put the museum? Where would we have put the art gallery? It's actually, I think it's far better now that we have, these centres for, housing in there and the advice centres, but we've still got the computers and, these ways forward. Now, it's very possible to make knee-jerk reactions on these horror stories and end up throwing the baby out with the bathwater. I mean, that's a sizable consideration that it's going to cost us this year just to make savings in the future. And we will still be up against this. So we really need to be looking, I think, just extremely carefully at what we lose when these things
go down. In my limited experience, anything that's ever closed never been reopened. So we move on to the next saving and the other concern. And that can sometimes be the problem. So if we can prolong the execution, as long as possible.
No, you don't mean prolong. You don't mean prolong. You mean postpone.
Postpone. Sorry, whoever.
Sorry to correct you there.
But it just gives us that breathing space there, because there's a lot of creative people in Newport, and if anything, over the past few months, we've noticed how many creative groups and individuals there are out there. And again, it's kind of listening to ideas, because we're focusing on saving money continually, and we're focusing on the negative aspects of the services we provide. But really, some people could come in and say, "Do you know what? You've ever thought about doing this?" Because we're a bit blinkered.
I mean, the last budget under the previous leader, there was a very sincere attempt here to actually make those savings, perhaps more savings across more departments, but smaller amounts, with the hope that we could then re-establish these in better times. And that was, that was the approach then. So it's really, something which is as community focused. As the years go on, we as a local authority have lessened, not through any bad intentions or ill intent by officers or members, we become further and further away from the ability to actually deliver to the people who live here. And there is nothing wrong with them having high expectations of what local authorities offer. We should all be aspirational. We should all actually be quite demanding, because we will just lose things otherwise.
I think there's actually quite a lot of right years next year. It's probably quite hidden, really, because a lot of those are delegated or whatever. So there's probably more than any other year sort of income generation opportunities. So, for example, Sylvia's area not here. We're looking at how we can move into pest control generating.
I was interested in
we're looking at what extra income the CCTV can earn through through being competitive on alarm monitoring, etc. So there are lots and lots of those things. But we're not discussing them this group because they're not
No,
actually
yeah,
a negative benefit.
I'm
So
sure,
you're only
yeah.
discussing.
I'm sure that,
anyway.
Dave's team would have
and
looked at
there's
options
yeah.
and explored things and this, that's not the, I don't think anyone's questioning it happened. It's just, having not been part of that process, a committee as it happens, type of thing. And what input.
I think it's probably a bit hidden in this process, isn't it?
Yeah, I'll let Councillor Rees come in just on this point and I'll try.
Senti still looks under.
Councillor Screen, was that a hand from earlier? I presumed it was.
Yes, Chair, if I could just make a brief point about the closure of the Clean and Doriga House libraries. A bit of creative thinking about how we can use these facilities. For example, in Cardiff, they have hubs. Libraries are also community hubs where community activities can take place. Children can go there and play. And you can book space for community events and so on. Surely it's not beyond the wit of man to be a bit creative about how we can actually enhance and improve and increase the usage of these facilities. Okay, thank you, Chair.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Screen. I'll let you both come in briefly and then we've sort of made a fair sort of impact on this particular point.
It is a quick one, I promise. With regards to the volunteer-led hubs that we've got and centres that we've got, I referred earlier for working with the umbrella body for voluntary sector earlier on. I mean, what we found then is, unfortunately, the world's not awash with people who want to take on the key roles. The chair, the vice chair, the treasurer roles, the secretary roles. And one thing which has been hard back in recent years is the opportunity to train those people. So I think it'd be really good if we want to develop, if we're serious in moving over to more volunteer-led places, we've got to provide the training for them. We've got to allow them to upskill themselves, because this is actually, I think, what leads to a lot of these failures. You've got people in key positions who don't know what they're doing.
And I think the role kind of described earlier, that's part of what we want to do, but more than happy to talk to partners on that point. Councillor Thomas.
Councillor Rees, do you want to finish?
Yeah, just very quickly, I think more a statement than a question. I think before we sort of do anything, I do hope the consultation comes across in terms of the demographics, because I'm guessing the demographic you probably find is more linked to a slightly more aged population that use the libraries possibly, and not as Councillor on the screen referred to, not just for taking books, but for chatting and socialising and for themselves. I think it's important that it's looked at from the wider social benefits as opposed to something it is providing a service to the state, that sort of age group. So I'm hoping that will come across in the public consultation as well, if not also encouraging my residents really show those points.
We're on with things to do in character of address to ensure that they do allocate consultations that legislators reflection. So maybe let's think about how we.
Yeah, just a couple of points. So in terms of that consultation, we're meeting with board members tomorrow. One of the things we'll be talking about is how best to reach out into their network they will express. And just in terms of appointment hubs, that is something we do in locations across the city. So this actually might be a museum. Is this actually a hub given the range of services? Obviously, we've got Greenland, changes of Bettis. So that is something we're looking at. It's just trying to put in this proposal is think about where we can do that. The financial activity.
Yeah, I think the just sort of move us along this point is it's clearly an emotive subject which the committee are concerned about, and will try and sort of formulate a recommendation from all those things that we sort of talked about. One of the things I think you sort of touched on then as you were summing up, Dave, but I think because lots of our consultation is digital now, and the people that might be affected by this, but they actually ought to be doing it in the libraries themselves. So that's what I think. Actually, if you've got those people that are in the library using it, and the librarian or whoever's in that facility says, "Thinking of closing this, why don't we first in and tell him?" That's a really good way to get to the people that are actually going to be sort of massively affected by this. That's why I'm just
I think that's a good one.
Absolutely.
And obviously members can also respond to the public consultation for anything else you wanted to feed in. I'm just mindful of the time I wanted to move this on. I hope everyone got the sort of opportunity to get one. Very much on that one. So we've got the two budget pressures then, if that's okay, and appendix 2, which are bear with them, just moving backwards on the book. Okay. Yes, sorry. Transfer of home maintenance grant to RSG is the one, which
Just said that that's not actually a pressure, that's a technical thing, the way they write the budget. So basically the grant was set aside and now it's moved back in and you have to use the grant. So it's no net change. It's a technical change. We used to get that grant labeled something else, not coming in with a label.
I thought that was the case, and I did explain that to the committee in the previous, so I think we can probably leave that one alone unless the committee have got anything on it. The second one, which will be sort of acutely aware from your sort of service reports and all the rest of it, and last year's budget is the sort of hopeless demand for temporary accommodation. Addition, on top of sort of the year before. So if you want to give us a brief overview of that, don't dwell on it, 'cause I think we probably know what the challenges are.
Yeah, no, of course I can. So overall, last financial year and into this financial year, we've seen an increase in demand for temporary accommodation. Local authorities can never make temporary accommodation stack up financially because of how the housing benefit system works. It essentially caps the amount of money that we can receive from DWP at equivalent to the 2011 local housing rate, the local housing allowance rate, the kind of housing benefit rate of 2011. So if you're having to put someone into a hotel, maybe it's costing you X amount, and you're only getting kind of 70 pounds a week back for that pressure. Whilst demand has continued to rise, that does kind of obscure some really good work in the team to reduce the overall cost of TA and to change how we're procuring TA and to try and buy a more cost-effective TA. It also obscures some other good news in terms of the changing demographics of people within TA. So as I think I probably mentioned at the previous scrutiny, this year we've begun to see our policies kicking in, and we've seen a sustained reduction in the number of families with dependent children in temporary accommodation. The reason for the pressure is we've continued to see a corresponding increase in the number of single adults coming through as homeless with a duty to be placed in temporary accommodation. And that's a pressure across the system. It's most acute within homelessness, for about at any one time between 70 and 75% people in TA single. And 60% of people in the common housing register are single, and we don't have the supply of single person accommodation to meet that demand. I think it's also just worth saying that there is a huge amount of work going on to reduce costs there. You'll see there's a budget pressure of 3.1 this financial year, but our transformation plan is delivering the reduction down to 1.8 for the next financial year through changing the models of the temporary accommodation that we're providing. So this 1.8 is really going to meet that shortfall between what we're receiving and the cost of running temporary accommodation. Over the next kind of 12 to 18 months, the key things we'll be focusing on is working with partners to develop alternatives to temporary accommodation for single people. That supply is the way that we begin to drive down those pressures.
Okay, thanks. Any questions on that? It's sort of fairly self-explanatory in terms of what it looks like. Anything anybody wants? I've just got one question if I can. So the 3.1 million is the pressure for this year. So that's what you intend to be over budget.
That's what we're overspending this year.
Overspending, yeah.
If you remember,
because we put 1.2
that was
last year.
so what was there was a lot of money held in, so in effectively our capital payments were a lot lower last year. So if you look on, there's another line which is kind of capital payments. So it wasn't moved permanently in that budget in the hope that we'd make movement down. It was we're not gonna have to pay this money back this year, so we'll be butts in there. That'll offset. So he's got a headline overspend of 3.1.
Yeah.
So we always knew that we'd be an overspend. was about 2.
Yeah.
So it's even more than that, because as well as the with all the people on, there's still more people coming at the top. So yeah, so he's overspending by 3.1 this year, and this needs to get it down to overspending by.
So, because what I'm trying to say is it's almost a reduction rather than an increase, because even though it's not budgeted this year, we're having to spend it.
It,
So,
it will,
you know what I mean?
It
So
will require
yeah,
a reduction.
yeah.
To meet that
So-
number, yes.
And I guess my follow-up question, is that realistic? And you probably, I think, I asked the exact same question last year, and you said yes. It wasn't, so-
I think with that, you know, the trends are looking different now, particularly in terms of families, and it's getting to that 1.8. There's that really is the housing transformation kind of kicking in with, you know, various aspects like changing the configuration of how we provide support and intensive housing management in TA, and the counts of a couple of kind of quite costly sites, so supporting some of our most vulnerable residents to get accommodation.
So I think it's a fair question to say we haven't done as much as we should have done last year. I would say that's true to an extent. There is a lot of underlying progress. It's drowned out by the pressure getting worse. So, and particular sort of that external bodies throwing things on. So, we've had early prisoner release in the system. We've had streamlined silent protest, and so those, even dealing with those numbers, although we're progressing more at a faster rate than before, the actual total coming at the top, if you like, has increased, and so you know. Needs to stabilise. It's not that there has been no progress. There's been a lot of progress, not as good as we want, but it is drowned out. And I would say, and you all know from your experience, is councils are facing the same thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's not something you need to date.
Yeah, and it wasn't meant, that question wasn't meant as criticism.
No, but I think it's a big
Yeah.
challenge,
Yeah.
because you were entirely right. You did say last year, and you're confident. And,
Yeah.
And David was very
I was,
confident.
no, you know, because it's about prudent
Yeah.
budget, and actually, if you think it's going to be more like 2.5 million, we ought to make that provision now rather than sort of. That was,
I think the underlying signs are there. They're drowned out in that headline number. So,
yeah.
I mean, it's not good news that these numbers continue to increase. You know, and although it might be good that we've got fewer families in there, which I certainly welcome, because how miserable can it be
Yeah.
if we've got children and
Absolutely.
adults, you know, in such limited space? It's just awful to think about. But we regarding that demographic of single men who are now filling 75% of the places, how much of that is ping pong, if that's the right expression? You know, in one of the measures in the NHS is, you know, they look at people who go to a GP and they have a complaint, something which needs a treatment, and then they keep coming back again, which would rather suggest that it might be a misdiagnosis, or it's inappropriate medication, or not taking some communication breakdown. So, you know, I know that we can people can exclude themselves from this temporary housing service if they can't conform to certain requirements which we have of them, if I can just put it that way. But you know, how many people just keep reappearing, and is that sufficiently big number for us to need to be able to be building strategies in to deal with them?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So, I mean, this is a ballpark figure, but we could probably say around any one time we've got between 80 to 120 single adults, so men and women, the majority are men, who have a level of complexity in their support need. And we've done a lot of work over the last year, particularly around rough sleeping and the trends for rough sleeping in the city now,
Which is good news.
but also in terms of looking at our housing support division. So we increased housing support division in the TA by about 7 or 8 posts in the last 6 months, and that's not commissioning a new service that takes time to set up. It's looking at where we have more specialist providers, particularly mental health, substance misuse, and providers that focus on people coming out of prison, and kind of creating a bit of a multi-agency team there. So we can do a lot of that. We're also developing projects that will specifically focus on that group and hopefully give a bit more kind of settled accommodation and more access to things like one-bedroom flats for this group, because there's a lot of the issues are where if you've got people with significant support needs shared facilities,
Yeah.
that can be a flat.
It's that shared facilities is a real problem, isn't it?
It is for that client group. It really is for that client group. Rather than it's less of an issue, but it's we can do so much and we're working really hard today. We're really working closely with our adult social care colleagues now. There's really regular meetings between my service managers and social service managers in social care, so that we can really look at those complex cases of needs split between housing and care. And colleagues within public health that can really beginning to focus on these issues. So
And I'm aware of these three ones as well, aren't they? The meeting this morning.
yeah, and just later on about not about housing, but recently some text public health released produced an action plan for women who've experienced domestic violence and homelessness in the city.
That
Housing,
sounds
yeah.
really constructive.
Housing is only one part of the
Yes,
solution.
yes.
We need a system-wide approach.
Yes. Yes, okay.
Thanks, Councillor Pym.
You mentioned a lot of the temporary accommodation single adults. Are they all from Newport? We tracking where they're coming from? You hear a few myths and rumours as to the people moving from outside of Newport here because there's a community for homelessness. You get more support, there's more drugs available. There are reasons why people tend to migrate towards Newport. And are we aware is that there are any data as to where these people have come from?
Everybody in TA through the process of homelessness assessment would have a local connection to Newport. So that could be defined as you've been a resident here for a period of time, you've got a very close family member or something like that. So everyone in temporary accommodation has a connection to Newport. They're not people who've moved from elsewhere, been in Newport for a couple of days, gone into temporary accommodation. The only exception to that would be if someone's moving into the city because they're unsafe in the area where they've been living, so particularly domestic abuse. What I would say is that through our outreach team, we're really working hard where we are identifying people who are sleeping rough in the city and don't have a connection to support them now to reconnect back to the area.
So we're talking about the single adults that we're responsible for. So there could be single adults in private temporary accommodation that they're not directly linked to us. There's
It's probably our responsibility if they would record a duty to them in Newport. What David says, we wouldn't have a duty to someone who's.
Yeah, there are a few properties within Newport, one in Clannis Place in particular, where again I was informed that most of the people who reside there were from Torvai, that they weren't from Newport, but they were still a problem for us because they reside in our city. A lot of them started sleeping rough directly outside the property, and that's one of a few that I've heard of. Whether they're halfway houses, but they're still temporary accommodation. Are we directly responsible for all temporary accommodation within our city?
Not through our homelessness duties, no. If it's a house local occupation, it could be through environmental health. But in terms of homelessness, our acquisition and our placement is temporary accommodation. Everyone would have a local connection to the city.
If Council A was placed on there, it would be them picking up the bill and then dealing with that.
Yeah, because again, I've heard that there are people from other local authorities residing in Newport.
Yeah, I mean, that's been
in indirect,
in homelessness there, because Newport had sort of more of that type of accommodation, so Torvine, Blind Gwent and other local authorities close to us all used to place people.
But it can compound the issues that we've
Yeah.
already got.
And then I think remain responsible for
Yeah.
them. Newport does it. And it's likewise when I look
But people think we're
place
responsible.
people out of area as well.
So members of the public think we're responsible. So complaints about certain properties end up coming to us when we're not directly responsible. And the other issue, you said that we're not going to build accommodation suitable for single adults. Again, a concern for me would be far too many of these types of accommodation all compact in one place. So I think again, the problem building that's recently been closed in Clarence Place, which is an attraction for lots of antisocial behaviour, again directly outside. And it was kind of bedsit on top of bedsit, and it was a building of bedsits. Again, the fear for me would be that if we're building a block of flats or a complex that was all aimed at kind of 1 bedroom, kitchen and bathroom, all the collection or concentration of people with the same needs and issues are all in one
I
place.
think it's we find it sort of swings and roundabouts. If it's the correct demographic for that, and also if there's the correct support, then, you know, that doesn't much better than dispersing them and then chasing lots of different people around it. But you know, there's
I think we need to think
But
where
they
I
had
think we
staff
need to
there, they had staff actually managing that site, which made it a lot more workable. I can think of other places where we don't have evidence, they're not properly managed and they're a right pain in the, you know.
But the people would be outside the building for most of the day, and again it was a main thoroughfare to the city centre, so it became a bit of an eyesore. I know that, you know, people have to be looked after and they have to be housed somewhere. I just think moving forward, where we build these new.
Did you witness that?
Well, again,
It's lots of stuff gets anecdotal.
no. Well, again, the declaration of interest. I've worked in the fire service, so we turn up most days when the alarms are going off. So, and also to some of the fires that were in these bedsits from what they were doing in them. So, yeah, I've seen it firsthand.
I think the key thing is it's all about housing management practices and the level of support, and I think things that last 10 years, things have changed so much within the sector, different types of approaches to engage with people differently, to really, all of these people have got long histories of trauma, and it's working through that. That's the key.
Any other questions for David or any housing stuff?
I think it was this meeting last year, you said about the trauma-informed approach which you've taken on. You're going to continue with that?
Yeah. Although the front line staff of summer had trauma-informed training, that's a role basis. I think there might be some more through over this being arranged to organisations throughout Newport and April.
Right. This is actually something we don't get feedback on, isn't it? These specific pieces of training, which are obviously very important within your team. For example, what we do get in the scrutiny reports is the number of managerial catch-ups with staff. But I mean, you know, really, the crucial training thing is probably a more important thing for us to be aware of.
Yeah.
Can we make that a suggestion, certainly, Chair?
Yeah, so if we can pick it up as part of either a forward work programme or as an end of year report. There's a progress and the objective. It was an objective initially, I think, on your plan. Yeah. Councillor Pym, did you want to come in? Alex Pym?
Then you might go.
Thank you, Chair. It's regarding the new policy mentioned in the report, referring to the premiums on empty properties. Can David clarify if we have generated £601,000 directly from this policy? And if so, are we looking to increase the premiums in line with other councils?
I think this is one for next week, Alex. It'll come under Miriam's service area because it's finance rather than housing.
Okay, no worries.
Charge on the house. It's one for Miriam next week for finance.
Okay, apologies, Chair.
No, that's okay. Perfect. We can let you go. It's longer than Neil and I have planned for you, so we do apologise. But very good discussion. And really useful.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you. Yes.
Okay. Sorry, Tracy. Neil and I have got one very good, but that was time. So we've been waiting a while.
Brilliant last time.
It was luck. Yeah. I did say that last time to Chris and keep on here. You know, they do a lot.
Point anything
No.
down.
I can't make next Wednesday, by the way. Thought you told me to.
Which
So we will start off back at Appendix 4. So we are looking at one budget saving, that's the non-statutory pre-application advice. I don't think that there are any Appendix 2. Check. That's okay.
There was an existing, sure, previously agreed,
Right, okay.
so not a new one.
Nothing on the Appendix 2 for budget pressure and investments. No? Yes, so
Not a new one, no.
No, that's okay. So we'll just take the one then, which I think is planning fees.
It is,
Yeah.
yes, Chair. So this relates to discretionary pre-application advice.
Yeah.
So you may be aware that we offer a statutory pre-application advice service and discretionary one. So the statutory fee is set by Lodge Government. And with all pre-application advice, you don't need to apply for it. It is discretionary, but there is this statutory fee and service compared to discretionary. Basically, the biggest difference is we offer a meeting as part of the discretionary service. So we do review all of our fees, as you can appreciate, and as part of sort of the review of the service we provide, what we noticed was with our larger application service, when we looked at what other authorities were charging, a bit of benchmarking exercise, we weren't charging the same rate as they were. So essentially, what this then said, actually, we could be charging a little bit more for the same service that other authorities do, and based on the number of applications dealing with for the larger schemes, we think that would derive an additional £2,000 a year.
Okay, fine. So we've got fees and charges. This not included in that as discretion. I didn't know why that was a separate item, to be honest.
I'm a bit unsure of the answer to
Yeah.
this, but you're right. All of that done are in the consultant on, so there's loads of stuff. We don't individually consult on something.
Yeah, I guess my sort of question is it something that sort of needed a headline above all the other fees and charges? Or is there something that we should be considering? Is it contentious?
I know well,
that sort of thing.
I'd say it's less contentious than the life fees.
Okay.
I mean, it's discretionary. So people, they don't like how much we charge, and they don't have to do it. They don't have to use us. And then it's as simple as that. And there are the statutory services they want to pay less, but the difference is the added values we see is the fact that you can access an officer and meet face to face with that officer to discuss your proposal rather than just being a transaction of plans and else.
Do we get any benefit from it? So is it our interests that people come and talk to us beforehand? Does that save us time? You would think in the sort of determination and everything else then.
In theory, yes, because obviously what we've had early sight of applications, we can identify any issues, any suggestions for to improve an application. So ideally, when the application comes forward, then the issues that we've identified have been addressed, and it's a smoother process for us in terms of some of the more technical issues and the design issues and things like that. Clearly, they don't need to take on board our advice.
Yeah, of
So
course. Yeah.
you know, the application is only as good as the submission. But you know, if all parts work together, then we should get a much better application.
My follow-up question, the logical question is, will it cost us more than the £8,000 we're bringing in time to determine the applications? Because people won't bother paying for the pre-app because they'll just put the application. That makes sense. I didn't work that very well, but
Obviously, we've got a statutory time scale to determine applications, and it is within the council to give to refuse applications without negotiation.
Yeah,
that's not an approach we take. We've tried
Yeah.
to enable development and enable good quality development. But certainly, it shouldn't impact our overall cost because we do have the ability to refuse that, and on the basis that if you come in for application advice, you would have understood.
like the things. Yeah.
So in a perfect world, that's how it works.
Sorry, Councillor Rees.
Thanks, James. Just so we can use an example, 2013, 2014, we did a whole garage conversion to a downstairs bedroom. I went through all that myself, so I sort of phoned back and called a couple of times just to check what we were doing, etc. Before we put the application in. So is this saying then that if I wanted to have that phone call at this time now, going to be, I'm sorry, you're going to have to pay to be able to find the advice out?
No. So we still offer access to a planning officer, so you can make a phone call, you can email, and you can fill it face to face at the information stage at the contact centre and the might be building. We've got appointments available for people to access that service and ask those questions. We also provide a householder pre-application advice service, and that's a statutory fee. I think it's £20. Again, that's a Welsh Government imposed fee. So you can have that informed determination, get something in writing that says, I don't need application, or I don't visit any problems, or you can ask to speak to an officer and get an informed. So that's still with changing access to this.
Yeah. Any other questions on this area? Yeah, it was. You were right there. And that's why I asked the questions. I didn't think we'd sort of get many. It just seemed sort of very kind of logical thinking. So yeah. Thanks. I'm sorry that went so long. But, that's what we learned from you on first. Thank you very much. So we're going on to infrastructure now as a service area. So there are none in the budget savings for consultation on appendix 4, so we need to be on page 30 then for the appendix to bridge pressures. Then they're labelled infrastructure. There's only one of them as well. I did allude to in the pre-meet, which was the home to school transport. So increasing number of pupils. So I don't know, Stephen, if you want to sort of give a quick overview of that, then we'll see if we can see questions.
I think it's fairly self-explanatory picture. Home school transport, we provide that service. So we see an increasing number of pupils, obviously demographics changing. Transportation of people to school, and like other areas of the council's work in the wider world, we are seeing increases in costs. So when we tender services are coming back much more expensive than anticipated. Some contractors are handing back contracts to us, which we then have to re-tender. It's all we secure at a particular price, then the contract might be handed back, which is the contract. But then we accept that service. That is a high price. That's probably just after this budget, that's a bit of a strange one in that it partly sits in Stephen's area, despite the fact it's big school.
You've just taken my question.
But it also then partly sits in education. So although Stephen's budget, he carries the budget for mainstream, so most people do. But then education carried the budget for special school transport, and so if you across the two, that it's actually a significantly bigger pressure. So it's about 1.5 million, but most of that is in the special school stuff. That has increased at a larger rate because again, the market is you need adaptive vehicles. It can be more challenging, so there's more pressures on there. But it's across the board. Really, it's just passporting cases, but we don't many here. So
I was literally going to ask the question: why is it sort of in the education service area? So, just for the committee's benefit, so if we're sort of excluding ALN and SEN for this purpose, so this is just probably people then living outside a certain radius of the school who need to be transported.
is
that right?
Was it 3
Yeah.
how we provide it.
3 miles.
Probably secondary schools rather than primary schools as well.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess there's probably some of the faith schools as well. Presumably, is that primary and secondary?
But we do
Yeah.
provide transport information for
Yeah.
schools. Yeah.
I think it's under the learner travel measure policy, so again, terminology of that. So that goes for the education cabinet member.
Yeah.
It, and then Steve picks up Bill. So it's, but it's,
Yeah.
yeah, so it is a little bit confusing, but, you know, the general gist of the issue that affects us and the budget in education is that these contract of unit costs are rising significantly. And also the number, I just want to see it's because we're talking about children, but but for the number of children,
Journeys.
journeys is a softer way, isn't it?
Yeah.
Is increasing.
Okay.
There have been, yeah, I mean, from a licensing point of view, we are aware that have been, I don't know whether it's always happened, it's probably always happened, but we've become aware of perhaps cases of fraud. And it is something which a licensing department are clamping down on and checking on a more regular basis. And obviously they're doing that with pupil transport department.
Yeah, we work closely with the licensing team.
Yeah.
So
There's been some fairly blatant stuff, but they have been caught up with, let's put it that way.
But you know, well, this is a big noise issue. Is people actually relatively lucky in actually we're a dense urban environment. The number of these people, we're a lot less than most guys think. Rural this is like every child bus for 21. So yeah, it's a big impact.
It's a big budget anyway, isn't it? If you sort of, just the quarter, nearly 300,000 there. Then if you're talking 1.5 million across both the sort of ALN and SCN on top of it, that's a big budget.
The charges seem quite comprehensive in some cases. I mean, they will be more than standard taxi fares.
Yeah.
And sometimes that's compounded by the fact children with special needs need accompanying adults, which is another area which may be challenging. But but the costs really rack up on these things.
So the sort of things that are driving that is obviously mainstream transport bus passengers have dropped, and so in some ways the mainstream buses were able to subsidise to some extent. But also, you're talking about the people who are on these. You look at we're talking earlier about increases in living wage, increase in national insurance, and certainly for vehicle parts and things. All those costs, inflation going up. Effectively, that just gets passed forward to us. And that's what driving that.
Have we sort of done the work as a council to understand whether there are better ways to deliver this that might?
We are looking at other options. Again, doesn't help in this instance, but our spend is quite considerably lower than most councils. Part of that's our demographic, but also at that distance is we're at the distance. Some of the councils are a bit more generous on that. Can it be in other ways? It's challenging because the problem you got is you need all the transport at 9 o'clock in the morning. Then you don't need anything, and then you need it all at free. So in essence, you cut. What do you do without the rest of it? So whatever you do, you're so dependent on the market. Unless you want to just keep things hanging around for.
Exactly. Okay. Any questions from the committee on this particular area? No, all happy? You can go off slightly as well. Thank you. That's good. Thanks, Stephen. We'll see you at the meeting in February. Yes, I'm good.
That's all the time you've got we have spent out there.
Yeah.
It's nice you have got 3 Davids as well.
Okay, so page 29 then, ladies and gentlemen.
we stand in environment.
Environment public protection, So we have got a couple of lines in there. Creation of hit squad, increased grass cutting. Just to write this one. Yeah, we got some interest in this one. So
Brazil's got a whole different.
We think we probably should rename this.
Yeah.
It's a Scrutiny hit squad.
Because, yeah, we may get the wrong type of applicant.
Okay, yeah, so do you want to tell us a bit about sort of hit squad one first? We'll do
Well,
that first.
this is just about improving the cleansing standards in Newport, so there's like additional resources to enable us to, increase our delivery. We've had a number of initiatives in place over the last 18 months, something like that. We created a deep cleanse team that have been going to areas that had some issues with cars not moving, terrace areas, etc. So we could liaise with residents and target everything at once. That was quite successful. We'd like to expand that to cover more areas. There have been mention of main roads issues with some of the signage not being clean enough. More resources put into some of the main roads that we cannot clean that often because of issues with traffic management and having to close lanes. So there's a number of initiatives there that we will look at to increase.
Yeah, we should probably see.
And
So when we've gone through some of the other pressures, there's no choice, yes, to pay plus pay, whatever. Obviously, the ones in this area are more sort of political investments. They're decisions sort of leaving the cabinet member want to do more on making this tidy and clean. So that's what's driving this rather than. Yes,
So this is street cleansing.
Yes.
Is it?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
Definitely nothing to do with assassination.
No.
Any questions from committee?
Yeah.
Councillor Bell?
Getting more and more stormy weather and with the weekly recycling plastics and cardboards and we mentioned this previously, it's most of the stuff that comes in fits with the wind. And also the stuff that's not picked up when the recycling teams are in a rush. Again, is that an area where this hit squad will be focusing on? Will it be kind of post stormy weather or
This is around all year, and we'll be developing that in terms of what we do. But yes, those instances can help us. The problem is you have stormy weather, and we'll get a complaint that the bin's blown over, and you go and the roof's off next door, and you think, okay, let's get things proportionate.
Yeah.
But it will help with that because the problem we're trying to identify is actually the vast majority of the attention resource is tied up in general, fortnightly or whatever. So when there are instances, there's not really a lot of capacity to respond. And so this should, help with those issues somewhat.
More of a hit squad. That was the sort of hit squad.
Yeah.
So we've got the people in trundle round in the little machine,
And people can, because areas will need regular cleansing. This is supposed to deliver
It's
over
on top of
and
that.
above.
Yeah, both and above, right. So this is the flexible service. So is this going to work alongside the team that are going to clear up fly tipping, or are they not going to be involved in sort of clearing up fly tipping?
They will still maintain this dedicated fly tipping team that go out there. This is more flexible resource. So again, the schedule resource, they respond with it. They go around in the route, etc. The mechanical sweepers, they go around, they'll clean that. I won't say regardless of need, but everybody expects their street be swept X number of times, so they'll do that. So this is so yes, it'll interact and work with them. There won't be. I mean, I'd quite like to see cleansers fighting for litter on the street, bring back a bit of, but we're not with that. And they'll be working with them, but it was designed to deliver service standards over and above. So so this is even more flexible. So they go to an area where there has been some fly tipping and the place doesn't look. But because I know there's been an incident, whatever, they'll be able to deal with all those issues.
Have we got the detail in terms of how many people this will employ in the squad team? And then have we sort of done a plan on what that work looks like to sort of justify that investment? Or have we got the data, if you like, that sort of says we need this amount of resource to kind of deliver it? Is that sort of data driven, or how do we sort of reach the idea that we need 170,000?
So it is built up of staff and in essence, one team. They require a vehicle, they require budget, they require, so it's built up from that.
So that's based on 2 teams of 2 people with driver and operative in a vehicle.
Yeah.
can either work together as a cluster of 4 or be dedicated like each waste resources, for instance, depending on need. Yeah.
I think the concern at the moment, something that's recently happened over the past few months, is it is tied in with the bin collections and say to a degree the booking system at the tip and people just being lazy and selfish. And then black bags that being left next to public bins, and as a result, then public bins being removed. We've lost 2 recently, and I think whilst we're improving a service, that service is probably going to be dealing with the aftermath of these changes in policy. So we're losing bins, but then we're picking up all it.
So there's more to do on those, and earlier this week when we prepared waste and that we dedicate waste support team, they are doing that. I mean, interested in the feedback. So Marshall, when they were down Marshall yesterday, people haven't run out of people yesterday, and they identified people use a bath, and so 2 of the bins are kind of overflowing with waste from Cardiff. Why someone's going to be seems, well, I don't know, I can't think of anything more inconvenient than that. The other was something with nappies. So some of that is about we're also investing in more deployable cameras. We see out and about, and we use those to people, and part of that is around enforcement, but also target. So the person with nappies is like, I don't know where they live, but we collect that from your house for free. So it's some of those explaining those rules, isn't it?
Councillor Rees.
Is this a bit of an introduction now in readiness for, as Councillor was saying, maybe an increase in litter when the tip actually closes? Are you sort of getting things in place ready, or is it just a reaction to we want to make Newport a much better place?
So just so there'd be no impact on any services for any of the tip. The tip bit that's closing is the disposal aspect of the back, which hasn't been used for Newport-based waste for a decade or so.
It's just commercial
the
customers,
transfer station, HWRC
companies
side
that use it for disposal of their waste. Yes.
Right, misunderstood that.
Yeah.
So these are legacy sites that the council, through being in existence when this act passed, still had hold of. We haven't spoken on waste there, but
I'm sure the Bitcoin isn't so much.
I'm not going to mention it. I thought that's far too controversial.
gonna discuss.
Will the public bins come back at any point? Because we've had complaints of residents that people who are walking dogs that they have to carry their bags.
We get people asking for them to remove, asking them to be added constantly. We're probably at a higher number of public bins now than we have been for the last 7 or 8 years.
Yes.
Because we invested in installing them. However, it's a constant because you're always putting them close to someone's house, and so it commonly goes like this: oh, we want some more litter bins in our street. There's not okay. Put a litter bin in the street. Oh, I don't want outside my house. Move it outside their house. Someone else moves in, so there'll always be a bit of that anyway. So you never know exactly where they stand.
I think because of the 3-weekly bin collections, people scrundle when people don't waste in their bins, and a lot of, not all, but some. I think we need to try and make it as flexible and as easy as possible for people to get rid of rubbish when and where they can. I mean, I pick up litter in my street now, put it in my own bin, but not everybody does that. And the more rubbish they're saying, the more depressing and anxiety it is for everybody who lives in Newport. So, yeah, is this?
But there has to be a balance because the more litter bins there are, the more resources we need to employ to empty them, and some of them are not fully utilized really. And you go to some places and there's like a number of litter bins, perhaps in excess of what's needed in the area. So there's a rationalization process. I mean, we're not widely going and removing bins from places. If there's been any removal, there's been because there's been damage or issues with that, or it became an area that was hotspot for other incidents, and it really didn't allow residents to make a speak to them. So
Yeah, I mean, we've been supportive of them. We've been to some areas because it's just causing an absolute nightmare. People leaving bags to labour outside. We've had people sort of probably scrapping in the street. So, Councillor Rees.
Thanks, Chair. I mentioned a little bit about the cleaning of street signs. Is that his spot, or is that a different team that would come out and do that?
It's something that could contemplate if there's need as part of this proposal.
There's a lot of signs, certainly on the Apple 6-7, for example, is one that is your gross space around there, it's home written in there. That's got to be done for months and years.
Actually, the council has regularly cleaned since I've been, and I can't actually remember when I started, but well before that. So the resource on Clean Streets was removed. So you're right, it'll be a decade or more.
It's responsibility, is it?
So it is that the council has a responsibility to ensure they meet minimum legibility standards. But minimum legibility standards, to you and me, may not look very, so, they can't be obscured and certain ones need to be reflective. But that standard that we have is very low. You wouldn't want all the signs looking like that.
Yeah.
One that really irritates me is and this is the motorways, presumably it's Welsh Government, it's a sign which says to Festival Park. Festival Park hasn't been operating as Festival Park for years. So
But it is clean.
it is very clean. However, there's probably not a confused tourist around looking for this super sign.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it would only be signs on our adopted highway.
I think I ought to write to the ASMS. Yeah.
Any other questions on this particular point? In terms of the 3 weekly bin collections and the saving that we made.
Well, we don't
It's only 2 years.
Some bits this year.
Last year, this year.
So, because that was £180,000 saving.
Yes.
320,000. It was split for 2 years, wasn't it?
It was 2 years.
Yeah.
My point would be that this 170,000 would be better off spent on 3 weekly or 2 weekly bin collections. Personally, that's
So we could have to, so yeah, we're quite good at that. So you'd have to put the inflation balance of 320 plus say 350. Then for each percentage you don't recycle, that's an extra 400,000. So you need to swap out, gosh. Like Carol Ford, yeah, 2 from the top. So yeah, it would be about 1 million.
So it's not going to cut it then.
It's not.
But also,
is that the Welsh Government fine if we don't read
Combination of the fine and the tax.
Yes.
Right.
And then we've done to increase grass cutting if the committee agrees with the last point.
So this is just about, addressing concerns about, frequency of grass cutting. So this money will allow an extra cut a year during the season. We cut the grass between April and October, or September really. And there are some areas that are not cut in May because of the biodiversity and improvement like ecosystem resilience. So those would still be in place, but we would aim for a cut or the other ones with an additional 1 cut. So and it's not going to make people look like both wars, but it will be an improvement over current standards.
Okay. Yeah, Councillor Rees.
Thanks. Correct me if I'm wrong, didn't the leader there was extra money going into grass, so like 300 or 350,000, was it?
I think that's what I'm guessing now that it's probably talking about those 2 things.
Those 2 things together, maybe.
But I'd have to,
I'm sure. I thought I'd seen it somewhere. There was more money going into grass.
So this is the money going
Yeah.
into grass. Sylvia said it would be basically an extra cut.
It's not double counting effectively then.
No, any investments have to be gone through this process.
Yes.
I welcome this. I think after last year it was one of the main complaints that we got from residents that the city did not quite unsightly in certain areas. As part of this increase, will there be a focus on the cemeteries? Because I know the cemeteries were in pretty poor condition for large parts of last year and the year.
This includes the cemeteries as well. The cemeteries are cut on a rolling program, really. So we have a team working constantly on grass cutting. As soon as they finish an area and assembly, they do it like from west to east or whatever. They start on one end, they continue to the other end. we have some big cemeteries and it takes a while to complete. And sometimes, you know, by the time they go to an end and then they need to move to the next cemetery, it's like people are pretty like, you know, it's, you know, May, it's raining a lot, the grass is growing really fast. So we have peaks, especially during, you know, April, May, June time, where it's very, very difficult to catch up. And if it's like super wet, we have issues with machinery and the like, but we will put extra resource to try and, you know, go through the cycle faster.
Will this figure also increase the amount of grass that's collected after it's been cut? Because again, last year, one of the problems is the grass was left on top, and then we ended up with windy weather. That grass gets blown everywhere, and then you end up with weeds growing everywhere. So again, a bit like with the litter, is whilst we're solving a problem, we solving the other issues that are surrounded with.
The standard operation is that the grass that is cut is collected. However, it was split into teams. The teams cutting and then the teams coming behind collecting it. We had issues last year with, you know, manning some of the services, some delays, some, you know, issues, and then if it didn't happen immediately and it was windy, that was the problem. Really.
Which you know, almost a bill. Sylvie said, so you know, we've got, was it 5 cuts a year? Was it?
Yes.
So this will take it to 6 cuts a year, but you know, which judge for yourself. However, you know, you go back a decade, that's would have been cut very regularly. I mean, I don't think you go back to most councils to do that, so it will have an impact. But you know, it's not necessarily one course or it will. But you know, it is challenging. The cemeteries in particular are challenging. The St. Bullis, I think, is like the second largest cemetery or something.
There have been issues brought up about the Commonwealth Graves Commission, who haven't. They do maintain lots of the graves, but apparently not all of them. So that might be some of the areas.
The core problem you got is the cemetery, and in particular that one is massive, and I've actually got lost there twice myself. But that says more about me than anyone else. But the and of course, you know, how you generate the income is you know, the number of burials. Yeah, well, that if you've got a small cemetery and you have it 10, that's fine, you do. But if we're dealing with people now for the last 200 years that we're so that the maths of that start to get quite tricky, doesn't it? And yeah, it gets quite gory, but cemeteries aren't nice flat things. They are, you know, they're all uneven. So the resourcing to do that is really quite challenging. So it does take a long time.
It's very process. Very, very emotive and sensitive subject. Careful what to say, but for some of these older graves, would it be worth kind of covering over the grass and putting chippings down so that they, because again, surmising and guessing that maybe their relatives don't visit the 200-year graves as much as possible. And I know that you know, you got to think of the wildlife and the biodiversity of cemeteries because they're very rich with butterflies, bees, and all the rest of it. But some of the, you know, the older sections of our cemeteries, would it be a long-term solution to maybe cover the grass or limit the grass growth in those areas so you don't need that maintenance, and focusing on more of the newer, more recent graves whereby there are more visitors and they're more conscious when they visit the aesthetics and, you know,
I think it's very difficult to do anything in cemeteries. I think any time that we do any slight changes, we find out that people are visiting people we buried 100 years ago. So it's and of course, you know, it's really difficult to count them because again, there are so many people in these cemeteries and from so long ago, you know, they're long before records that we don't have email addresses for, I think, buried 200 years ago, etc. So it's a really challenging environment to manage. So this does allow a bit of extra resource to try and take the worst off that. But you know, Sylvia said the challenge is also in this area is it's actually quite difficult to recruit. You know, you talk to seasonal people, you know, we're just like doing quite a lot of heavy manual labour for a bit of time in and between the showers in the. So you know, even with this resource, we've got to find people to do it. So.
So is this using the our staff, or is this going to be employed outside?
It's additional seasonal staff to support the service.
Employed by the council.
Re-employing these individuals, will they be flexible and go from one area to another?
Yeah.
So they can take on different jobs, is what I mean.
I mean, they normally, seasonals are normally employed through agency because of the, you know, seasonality and flexibility that you know, gives the council.
Right, so they're not with us on any sort of permanent basis.
It's about 9 months.
It is about,
Right, okay.
So we've had 9 months of agency.
The alternative is you employ someone the whole year.
Yeah.
But really 12 months of a full year employment is,
Because agency staff are
yeah,
traditionally about twice as much.
No,
They're
no,
not, but
they're not.
if anything, marginal on the increase, it's ever so slightly cheaper.
Are we paying the living wage or do they get the living wage?
Yeah,
They do.
pay that. It's more to do with the complexity of the flexibility of our pension investment.
Yeah.
So we have to invest
I was
a lot of
thinking
money.
about the pension.
It's
the on
not,
costs
I mean,
will be
they get the same hourly.
We have to put a lot of money
So,
together.
you know, the salary they get is the same, it's just on cost,
to say,
so
I
that's
start
very.
from, we've had agency work, when we sign up to an agency, whatever the people paid in works, that's what the agent person is paid by the agency, and then their markup goes on top. I don't.
We don't have to pay the pension. That's the on costs because it's
Yes.
12.
It's now, it's
Well, the council pays.
The council's contribution to that is
It's
20%.
23%, yeah.
Yeah,
Because
you think
it's
about
gotta
that
deal with-
then.
And it starts, okay.
Yeah. I was just going to pick up on your no mow May point.
Yes.
We had a lot of complaints last year, and I've spoken to a number of other members about that as well, in terms of certain areas of the city where that probably, in the opinion of some members of the public council, is inappropriate.
Mhm.
Is there a review sort of suggested to look at that, or will it be
So
on the same
there's a
thing?
suggested internal review from the, countryside and grounds team to look at areas and decide whether, the current regime is appropriate or not. So there may be some areas that may change the regime. I think we also need to do better in terms of communication to residents with signage on site, information through social media, website, etc., about what areas are designated as, not to be mowed during May. And there are some pockets where we don't cut all year round because it's an area that
Yeah.
is okay for that. And we had some compliments actually for how lovely it looks from the flowers, etc. So I think better comms and rationalization of the areas.
Yeah.
Key points.
My personal view is, and I know other councillors share this, is that I think they would welcome it to feed into that consultation. So if there is a review from the countryside team, it'd be really good to understand members' views about the areas that they get particular complaints about, and they'd like to see sort of, no more made.
Mhm.
That's the right way to put it. Because I think there were particular areas, some around sort of highways and stuff like that, were sort of making visibility unsafe for all the rest of it. So they were sort of safety things. So it'd be useful to feed into that.
We'll have a look. I have to say, last year we got a lot of complaints about not cutting areas that turned out were not under the council control. We had loads of Newport City Homes land.
Yeah.
That, people that really don't know. So they would come and complain to, members or ourselves when, it's not completely outside our control.
Yeah.
Well, right.
Yes,
We also last year had sort of ideal growing conditions.
yes.
April, May,
It was
June,
really, really challenging.
the-
Yeah,
the
it was
sort
very
of-
challenging.
We literally had rain every single week this year. And we had the sunshine, and so it was just difficult. So it was shooting.
And I was going to say, the honest answer, no matter what resource you put at that, you've got to, there's a lot of grass to mow in this city,
Yeah.
and if you do get, depending on the weather conditions, you can't.
No,
Those
yeah,
roads don't suddenly
yeah.
work a lot faster.
Yeah.
So you've got to, there's always going to be a bit of, it's never going to be equal, is it? So
No,
it's
I
a
agree
challenge.
with that. I just think it would be useful as part of that sort of review
Absolutely.
to sort of, and actually it might be something. So it might be with some of feeding in on the scripts. There are other committee members' views.
I totally agree with it, yeah, get the views of the public. And they can understand, at least they've had an input in it, but I can't see anybody talking about the idea of putting extra resource into bus cutting and making it look a little bit nicer in the area.
Any other questions from the committee on those 2 points or anything else for environmental protection? Okay, thank you very much.
So let's check it, then I've got to.
Right, perfect. Thank you very much for your time, both. didn't formulate any recommendations for those who have to run through.
If you want me to stick around the recommendation.
No, it's fine, because what I was thinking is we'll run through these and then we'll actually formulate next
Yeah.
week's ones all together as one anyway, so that's fine.
All right.
Thanks for the time. I think we sort of went so long with Dave, but we sort of just moved the agenda along a bit then. So,
I think is there.
no, exactly.
It's a pressure, and it's actually something that will appeal to the residents.
We all want to see more grass, don't we? And
Yes.
clean the streets apart.
If you would also do with form papers and recommendations now, because what I would do is form papers.
Yeah.
To send them out.
I'm happy to do that. Yeah. In terms of our overall recommendations to cabinet, then we'll just go to one base of action. We'll go back to housing as the first one.
Yeah, so for the review of community centres and across the city, just for information from Paul and David, your query, Councillor Pym, about the community centres, what consider some councillors to sit on the board or check with legal, so I'll request that information. Also, your query, Councillor Roots, about the River Mead, it's built by planning developers. If there's any come back on council, so I request Paul to get our information as well. In regards to actual recommendations about the proposal, one thing I've taken is a comment from yourself, Councillor Pym, about it would be helpful if possibly we could introduce a take off scheme. See if they could see costings.
Yeah, a tapering of the costings of the building to run. So, you know, over time, hopefully that the voluntary group or charity will be able to take on the full support, but that not, you know, there being some support from the law, because ultimately they don't own the building or the land. So the council still own that asset. It's an asset transfer, but we're not responsible for any profit from the sale of it.
Yeah.
So surely the council should be offering some support along the way. And then the other thing is a bit like we got school governors that are councillors, and I think within our community centres, because again there are assets, that there should be at least one councillor sitting on a committee for, you know, within each ward where these community centres are. So there's some, you know, governance, that keeping an eye on what's going on, and also appointing communication directly to the council. You think, Kate?
Well, it's been done in other areas and on different sorts of committees. If you've got, I have to be honest, if you've got a particularly difficult committee, then they will just be resistant.
No, but they have to allow.
Well, yeah,
They have to have, we were talking about
terms
18
and
community
conditions.
centres. To take the asset transfer on, there has to be, one of your committee has to be a local councillor,
I mean,
regardless of party.
but
Have to have.
you know, if you think about a positive experience of this, the former Handpost Library, there used to be a little tiny library at the Handpost. You know, you wouldn't believe the library would fit in there, but they actually did operate for a few years after I moved into the area. And then they were basically told in this big reshuffle in 15 or 17, whenever it was, that they would be closed down, and they opted to buy it, and it was a huge amount of money for what they were buying, because it's about the size of a shoebox, this place is, and money needed spending on it. But actually it's being run, as far as I can tell, very successfully. It's still going, it's lively, it engages a lot of people from the community in Stonehill, from Gare and Antrim, you know, use it. Yes, that's right, the touch centre, yeah. And it's, you know, it's very, you know, that seems to be a model of the positive way in which these things can be transferred. But it was, I think it was actually very unfair, the terms and conditions that it was handed on. They had to raise so much money to do that.
Whereas now they get an asset.
Yeah, and now well, it was an asset transfer, but there was a time when they had to buy it. It was really an asset sale.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not a transfer.
Yeah.
I'm interested for you, but I think that sort of our recommendation should be that if this is a policy that the council wishes to pursue, then they need to be satisfied that the arrangements for governance are robust. I don't think you can make a recommendation that
You can quite quickly,
councillor has to go on the committee.
quite quickly have
Why
a
a
change of
councillor?
personnel, you know, an AGM, you all of a sudden, you could have a whole new committee within a year.
Mm.
So the, you know, the people involved with that community centre could change quite dramatically because part of their constitution should be have an elected committee.
Do you know, the problem is that the committees don't change drastically.
They don't,
That's
but there is
actually
that risk.
That's actually, I think, that is well, that's a risk as well, that they never
Yeah.
change.
Yeah.
Because people are reluctant to, these could be a huge commitment in time. And they haven't got the training.
If I can suggest, Lord Chair, if this is a draft at the moment, before we go back, should we ask, prior to Tracy coming next week for a sight of the community asset transfer policies? Apparently, she's the one that's the one in place. Should we
Yeah,
ask to
it
see
was when Cowan.
That in this still doing it, so.
But I've seen something.
Yeah, it's still.
Okay.
They announced something. It's in the corporate plan. Maybe I've seen it in the corporate plan. It's not in. They haven't formulated the policy. They just said they plan to. Yeah. Sorry.
Well,
Yeah,
according
my
to,
fault.
I think David Hall said that they have a cap policy in place.
Yeah. Yeah. Could you ask for that before the next meeting? I'm not comfortable with trying to insist that a community group as a councillor on.
Well, it's not a community group, it's the whoever is on the committee running the community centre.
That'll be a community group,
I think
or a
it's very,
constituted group.
and individual councillors as well, the interest that they would have in these things would vary hugely amongst individuals. And we've also got areas, haven't we? I mean, Stonehill now has nothing at all because neither Mick Dad or I could be sitting on anything. We haven't got anything in that line anymore. I was on the one that closed, the most recent one that closed, and both of us were on the one that closed years ago.
Yeah.
Right. But I mean, you get other areas where there might be 3 councillors and they might have just one, and who makes a decision
Well,
about.
if not, then the other proposal was that the community centres experience some kind of audit.
I think that.
I think the audit is a really good point.
Yeah.
The reason is, right, you can stick a council on a committee that doesn't want to be there, just rocks up. And offers no real kind of participation in it, supports it, takes somebody else's place on the committee, potentially rubs a couple of people up on the committee in the wrong way and they leave, but they've got to go because he's got to be on there, because of course, and I just don't feel like it's the right thing to force.
No,
it.
that's fine. It was only a suggestion.
Yeah,
I
understand where it's coming from.
Yeah, I know there's a few community centres within Newport East that are just not really functioning at the moment.
Yeah.
And again, we haven't got that way of, you can knock the door and have a chat with them, but they're very much a closed group.
Years ago, the council had commissioning officers, and when the council wanted to, if you like, buy in a service, and it might, from a voluntary sector group or something like this, you used a phrase when you were talking, I can't believe it was now, but it was actually effectively about what were they going to provide as a community asset, and so every proposal that was made, they'd have to have details about what would be the gain to the community or that particular group. And these commissioning officers, you would have thought that they would have gone down with a fine-tooth comb for all of these and actually checked, all of the receipts, all the money that went out and the money that came in and everything. But I don't believe that job was really thoroughly done. And some of these things, looking at it from a health and social care point of view, which is what I was involved in, some of them, really, I don't think there was any appreciable, I don't know who was getting the benefit out of that, and they're costing them some money.
I also have an issue with insisting on audit, because audit's really expensive.
Yeah.
And the council probably hasn't got the resource to go and
even
audit
less-
them.
They've got
So
even less resources.
if you then ask the community group to pay for an audit, because currently they account will be exempt from an audit, they'll be low.
And just my
We should have
concern
another
at the moment is I think this is going to happen more and more with our assets. It's going to be it's going to be cheaper in the long run if somebody can run it on a voluntary basis, but it's still our asset, and the local community need to get the best out of that asset. So what can be put in place to make sure that these community centres are running as effectively as they can and they're being run appropriately?
Maybe that's a recommendation, is the council officers need to undertake a piece of work to ensure exactly what you just
There
said.
needs to be some sort of
They're
contract
run properly.
signed.
Yeah.
You know, but I think we could do with offering them the training, because the training sort of used to be available from places like Gavo or WCPA, CPA used to provide it. There would be some sort of cost for that.
Are you happy with the recommendation then that the council officers ensure that they have arrangements in place to ensure that the community asset transfer facilities are properly run, in accordance with any legislation, and that the council
support,
officers
support the officers, support,
Again, it's not just finance, it could be discrimination.
Yeah, because
The community they're not allowing certain groups in because of their own personal prejudices. So again, but it's a council building, so that still comes back on us.
Yeah.
So we have to be, we have to guard ourselves from that.
Okay.
That's one of them. We didn't like children running around and outdoor parties.
There was concern about the closure of Killeen Community Centre Library, which was a lifeline for older population in the smaller community. Can we suggest considering how these centres are promoted and pushed to encourage to promote and involve volunteers?
Yeah, happy with that. Everybody happy with that?
Yeah. Was there any further comments, recommendations in relation to that proposal?
Yeah, there was the public consultation, which was you done it personally. You said
It comes to libraries.
the libraries.
Yeah. They're very intertwined, these two, because the libraries are in a community.
Yeah,
centre.
yeah, exactly.
Makes it all different.
I mean, there was a lot of discussion on libraries, but I think the recommendation from the committee was more or less, you're rushing into this, and you need to kind of give it another year and start to do a proper consultation, not rush it through in the next sort of 4 weeks. That's what I felt the sum up of what we said was. Does everybody agree with that?
Yeah.
Yes, agree.
And the sum of money that we're saving, don't think is enough to justify this panic.
Yeah, it's only to do a grant. It's going to cost you 146.
Exactly. Not there's a
Yes.
cost.
So you just as well wait a year, save yourself 45 grand in the first year, and budget for that saving next year, and properly sort of look at it.
Yeah, I mean, I still feel the whole of the sum, which we're asking the public to have an opinion on, is actually such an insignificant sum. When you think about, that it's probably something like 50 million that we've had to save over the last few years.
I think it's not big.
Yeah, well, I think it's probably more than 50. I can't actually add it up.
I have done it a couple of years ago.
But yeah,
It's 80 odd
but
million.
it's a huge amount. The amount which councils have had to save is absolutely frightening.
Yeah.
And then we have to be accountable to our residents for explaining why the council tax keeps on going up. And and we get it, we understand why it is, but people who weren't as involved as us won't understand it.
If I may say as well, one of the comments from David was that the fairly excessive redundancy costs of 150,000 were because of the demographic of the people that we've clearly been there a long time.
Yes.
So they would have been under a large redundancy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you'd be better off waiting a couple of years for natural wastage. Keep your own for years. I know that sounds awful.
Did you make that note?
Forcing people to.
Yeah, forcing people to go.
It's pragmatic.
Yeah. So I think the committee's recommendation, if everybody happy, is that this saving should not go ahead this year. All works needs to be done on engaging the public on the likelihood of this happening and whether there are alternative options. Are you happy with that?
Yeah, yes.
And that the consultation should also take place in the library by the people who use it. I was surprised there's like 9,000 people using Strategic Park Library.
I think 35 people. It's quite a lot.
Yeah, so 35 people a day or,
And
34
actually, that's
a day.
not something to get to. I mean,
But
if
it'd be
you,
all the people in alignment that corporate, but all the old people's home, road definitely.
Yeah.
It's like a sheltered complex.
I was
We'll
thinking of
going over there.
because if you go and use a library and you want to park in the main car park, that's the National Trust car park, and they charge. They charge quite substantially.
If you go right the way around and come up by different by the shops by the other
But
side.
it's not many parking. Yeah, well, there is parking there. But it's not it's not a lot of parking. Yeah. So it's actually not very easy to get to.
Yeah.
But it is a nice building. It's got a nice feel. It was obviously built at the same time as the house. It's converted a barn or something, isn't it?
Onto a homelessness
Tables or
grant,
something
there's
like
nothing on the transfer of the grant on straightforward. Demand for temporary accommodation. I don't think there's any recommendations.
I mean, that is such a,
Just an update for information, Councillor Thomas, you asked about picking up information about the objective training. Temporary accommodation.
It wasn't-
no, it wasn't objective training. It was about the training that was being delivered. So the training that was being delivered to staff.
Yeah, trauma informed approaches
Yeah.
training.
Yeah.
I think it's called.
Wasn't only that one, but I mean, there will be a range of training, which is because they've identified really a set of values that they want their staff to have.
Yeah.
So it's training that establishes those, clarifies the values of the staff for the purpose of their employment.
Just wanted further information on that, sort of, or just where we stand with that training.
No, it can be added as an extra, because we get these figures on how many of them have had the management, the managements have had a, what's the phrase that they use?
Check-in.
Catch up with, checking with.
Yeah.
But actually, that's not as important as that one about establishing the staff have got the right set of key values.
We could pick it up as
Well,
part of the end of year service
yeah.
review. So to be honest, we're getting a bit of that end of service review. Because that'll tell us at the end of the year how many people have had it.
For the regeneration economic development proposal, increase in fees for non-statutory pre-application advice, will the committee content with that savings proposal? Or is there any recommendations you'd like to make?
that we can take things into consideration
Yeah.
with other councils.
Yeah.
So there's still, as they clarified, there's still a facility to
Yeah,
bring up
that's
those questions. So
Yeah.
makes sense.
Then the only other ones were the savings investments for infrastructure and home to school transport. Was there any comments or recommendations that you'd like to make in relation to this?
I think it's not content, it's what it is. This is what it is. This is having to
I
be
wonder
realistic.
whether we ought to add it to our forward work programme, because it's a really interesting area. Wouldn't
Yeah.
have to really put it.
I mean, if you're looking at serious savings, you have to increase the distance, so that only people living further away. That would be a hot potato, wouldn't it?
It would be a very hard
Yeah.
to
You could look into that because it's part with education as well, with people who could have a word with Stephen Ports, who had a with there.
Yeah.
Program.
It's an area I'd be interested in, how we're spending that sort of money.
I'm surprised that it was 289, but then things that
Wouldn't have got money good all together.
altogether, also that's decent enough for money.
Um,
We've had residents come to me and say,
I
we
think
need to
there's
get the transport sorted.
Yeah, with the children's, disabled children's provision, I don't think there's many staff working in that department as well as far as I know. I think it's just one, I think maybe one. I mean, I might be wrong here, but I've got the impression that it's only one person in that department. And that's very difficult then for them to establish whether that's the correct provision. I mean, I don't know if there's any work being done about whether transport can be shared, for example.
That's what I'm thinking, is there sort of.
How many,
Are they taking the easy option and ordering if you
Yeah.
get a taxi?
Yeah.
For example.
But
That's
there
what,
has
I.
it's an area that
Yeah.
needs to be scrutinised very, very carefully because we've certainly had a couple of cases that could be interpreted as fraud.
Yeah.
So it's really important that the council spending is protected.
Would you like me to request to see if this could be added on to the forward work programme for next year, or would it come as an information report to both place and people committees? And if there are further comments or information that you wanted, then we add it on to the forward work programme. What do you think would be best?
Information report first and then see what we get from that. And make a decision.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
I think we ought to have a report, maybe spend time with the product and allocate 10-15 minutes to go through ourselves.
Yes, we'll put it on. the
Rather
agenda.
than just send it out.
Yeah.
Have you read it? Yeah, I think,
Well, agenda, the information report will be discussed at a meeting just between us.
Then we've got environment and public protection, creation of a squad within the prevention service. Was there any recommendations or comments that you'd like to make in relation to that?
Last year, then always, so I think that's the same. Yeah, we just with the grass cutting, we recommended consultation on the renewable fee.
The cost of transport, school transport, what page was that?
It's on 29.
I just pick up.
Yeah.
Sort of a minor, obviously, having a meeting to discuss the way the reserves work. Should be some more information.
Yes.
So the commitment, like recommend from all the seminar, so that all members understand how.
Yeah, would be a good idea.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose the one thing with this, you know, if they're giving us money as a lump sum, and then we are obliged to actually, you know, contribute that on a year by year basis, while it's sitting there, we can potentially get interest on it. And then that's my real struggle as well, isn't it? Fiddling around with it.
Don't say fiddling and moaning in the same sentence.
No, I shouldn't say fiddling, sorry, Myron. Actually, you know, transferring it into a range of different funds but I mean, you know, we've had presentations on this before, and it seems to be quite a black art. Being able to predict how long you can leave it there.
Yeah, if you think about, for example, you have an extension on your house, right? So some people will save the money and then pay for the extension out. And other people will remortgage, pay for the extension line remortgage over a period of time. And now it depends on your own personal circumstances whether you can afford to pay the £500 a month extra on your remortgage or whatever that is, or use your capital. You might want your money sat in the bank used for other purposes.
So we don't have
when you
those
borrow
choices.
money, no, but if we borrow money, for example, we're building a leisure centre, we're using 20 million quid worth of reserves, but actually we could borrow the 20 million quid to build the leisure centre and use the reserves to fund revenue costs and pay for that leisure centre over the next 50 years, potentially. So
that sounds suspicious here.
No. Well, it's basically the same as business, right? So there's a decision to make about whether you want the money sat in the bank to use it for this, and whether you want to borrow money and have a revenue cost. If Marion has to borrow money to meet our liabilities, then we've got an ongoing revenue cost every year to pay the loan back and the interest, right? Yeah. But people differ on this. One person will go and spend their savings on a new extension.
I just don't like the idea of having to spend anything extra.
So yeah. The older generation, my mum and dad's generation, was not really a borrow money generation. They were more, but actually the younger generation, everything's on credit now, isn't it? You know? You've got to make sure you can afford your credit.
Yeah, but we can't. I think the days are gone when we can run a council like that. You know, on borrowed money, because funding is so tight towards local authorities.
Yeah, I'm not saying you run the council on it, but there will be things that you decide to build a reserve fund to do that you probably to do. When you got 120 million quid sat in reserves.
That transport thing, what page did you say?
29.
29?
Yes.
The school transport cost.
Yeah, it's the home to work cost under infrastructure it's the only line on infrastructure. Sorry.
Well,
yeah. I think we've done anyway. We've just got the scrutiny advisory.
So is that the total cost there of that? Yes. So the special educational transport.
Home was saying there's another 1.2 million on top.
Yeah, that's right. I thought he said it was more. Yeah, I think so.
I know there's a concern made at the beginning of we presented this information. So for next week, would you like me to do like finance proposals and index 2 all in one PPT saying would that be better for next meeting? So I can take that information in order.
Yeah,
but we would still keep the agenda.
Keep the whole papers, but if you could create the order in those tables and just pull out the road, say finances first, put finance, their investment, their savings, then whatever service area is next, we got next time, so people and policy,
Yeah.
put their investments and savings.
Yeah.
Follow in between with obviously the data that supports their savings
Yeah.
as well, and lay that out, because as you say, rightly relevant papers that we probably don't really to read for this
Yeah.
purpose. Yeah, we need to respond to them as part of it, but yeah.
We just
So
put-
we'll send it tomorrow.
He's on this.
And also, I'll send out the actions and outcomes I received today from David. Published the existing outcomes and recommendations that we've made, and the next meeting that we got is next Wednesday for the corporate saving proposals.
Fantastic.
Thank you, everybody.
Thanks very much.
You have that? Cheers.